So this has to be one of the most asked questions and topics that I keep seeing, and a video for it is long overdue. Tom, I want to be able to carry at my church, temple, mosque, synagogue, you name it, my house of worship, but there's an attached school. What the heck do I have to know so I don't go to prison? Well, guys, let's get into it. So the odds are that most of you live in a state like I do, like Wisconsin, where we have a statute that looks something like this. Under Wisconsin Statute 948.605 sub 2 sub A, any individual who knowingly possesses a firearm at a place that the individual knows or has reasonable cause to believe is in or on the grounds of a school is guilty of insert heinous crime. Here in Wisconsin, it's what's called a Class I felony. So you're looking at years in prison potentially. What would the government need to prove in order to put you in jail? And you're going to see how this all factors back. I'm giving you some of the law right now. Well, the government's going to basically have to show three things if you were ever arrested, charged, and your case were to go to trial. Number one, that the defendant, that's you, knowingly possessed a firearm. Possessed means that the defendant knowingly had the firearm under his actual physical control. The term firearm means a weapon that acts by the force of gunpowder. Keep in mind that definition is going to change with place and time. Number two, the defendant possessed a firearm in or on the grounds of a school. School means a public, parochial, or private school or a tribal school which provides an education program for one or more grades between grades 1 and 12, and which is commonly known as an elementary school, middle school, junior high school, senior high school, or high school. So you can see that if your church only offers some sort of daycare service, then that may not apply. Again, may not apply. Check your local listings. But if you're 1 through 12, odds are you're going to be affected. Number three, the last thing that the government would need to show in order to throw you behind bars. The defendant knew or had reasonable cause to believe that he possessed a firearm in or on the grounds of a school. Reasonable cause to believe means that a reasonable person in the defendant's position would have believed that the place where the firearm was possessed was in or on the grounds of a school. Now, I mentioned something else, which is school zones. School zones is basically the bubble that exists outside the school grounds. So we've got the school buildings, that's on the land. And then the school area, the school zone, is going to be this 1,000 foot, so approximately 300 meters, 330 yards, something like that, okay? But it's a 1,000-foot zone extending off the grounds of the school. Depending upon laws in your particular state, it may be illegal to possess firearms off private property. And again, check your local listings. So if you live within 1,000 feet of a school, that does not mean that you have to sell all your firearms or anything like that, okay? But you need to check your local laws because it often means that you cannot legally possess firearms within 1,000 feet of a school, okay? So I just want to draw that distinction between school grounds on the one hand and the school zone, which is off school grounds, that 1,000-foot zone. Check your local listings, very important. Now, I need to introduce something else to you, and then we're going to start going through the strategies. We need to understand that there are white areas in law, there are gray areas in law, and there are black areas in law. The white areas in law are areas where we are 100% fine. Our risk of prosecution, arrests, anything like that ought to be zero. The black area in law is more or less the opposite of that our risk of prosecution if caught, our risk of arrest if caught is going to be virtually 100%. In other words, we are 100% violating this. We're 100% no-go territory. Then there's the gray area in between where you can try to argue, if you have a very aggressive anti-gun prosecutor, that you are violating this. You have good arguments that if you have a very strong pro-defense, pro-to-a defense attorney, that you were not violating this. You could try to push the boundaries on this one way or another, and I have to be emphatically clear. This is not legal advice. This is a legal discussion, but you need to check your local listings, check with local counsel. I'm a Wisconsin attorney. I'm not an attorney outside Wisconsin, and even if you do live in Wisconsin, I'm not legally your attorney. This is a legal discussion This is educational. So the first strategy to check is check your laws, because oftentimes different states, different jurisdictions may actually have a laundry list of exceptions that perhaps you can meet one of them. So for instance, the most common one is, well, if you're a law enforcement officer, like a police officer, sheriff's deputy, state trooper, or warden, or someone like that, often you have to be during your actual active on-shift duty. Okay. Sometimes it could be allowable for off-duty or retired law enforcement, provided they meet certain criteria. And if you fit this category, you probably have an idea about what I'm talking about. Certain states may allow teachers to be able to carry under certain provisions or restrictions. Sometimes certain hunting exceptions could apply to allow individuals to cross school grounds in order to reach certain targeted, whether it's private or public hunting lands. Maybe there's an unloaded weapon requirement or something like that. There's all sorts of exceptions. Be sure to check them out. Odds are number one is going to apply to most of you, but I wanted just to quickly start there just to bang that one out. Please excuse this brief interruption. Show your support for this channel. Show your support for these ideas and the Second Amendment. Be sure to hit that like button that you find. It does a lot to help our channel out, helps the video, helps the algorithm, all those sorts of things. Also, drop your comments and questions down below. If I see enough questions down there, because I do engage and read the comment field, maybe I'll be making follow-on videos to this as well. Now, back to the discussion. Now, I realize that most people are not going to be a game warden or law enforcement officer or something like that, which brings me to strategy number 2, signs. Now, I want you to imagine this. I want you to basically try to set up using signs posted to the public for everybody to see in prominent locations. This is where the school grounds start as you head into the school. And likewise, the exact opposite is true. As you leave the school, this is where school grounds ends as you head into the house of worship. What we're doing here is two important things. We are setting the default status for your house of worship as clearly being not school grounds. We're setting the default status as being a house of worship. And likewise, we're setting the default status for the school as being the school. This is going to go back to the discussion that we just had when it came to what does a reasonable person know? If a reasonable person sees these signs saying this is not school grounds, hey, is that going to give you some defenses? I would think so. Is that a get out of jail free card? Is that a 100% bulletproof stopper to anti-gun cops, prosecutors, you name it, going after you? No, of course not. But this is something that can be put out there to try to help clear up these issues and message to everybody, including law enforcement, of this is how we view this and this is how we represent this. Now, keep in mind, the same thing is also going to be applying to the parking lot as well. Because if you don't say anything, because odds are there's a good shot that your school and your church parking lots could be shared or possibly entirely one and the same, then it may be worthwhile to be considering putting up signs saying that this is a church parking lot that may be allowed for the school during school times or something like that, right? And times is important too. If you're not comfortable for whatever reason, maybe all of the territory of your church and school almost entirely overlaps. So maybe for whatever purpose, you're not entirely comfortable putting up these signs saying this is the start and finish of school grounds, then you could also consider putting up the signs that this is a school grounds from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. on weekdays or something like that. So you can try to bound the definition of what is school grounds on the basis of time. Is that a bulletproof stopper to arrest and prosecution? No. But once more, it goes back to what does a reasonable person know under the circumstances? That's what we are building towards. And keep in mind as well, it's going to be impossible for the average reasonable person, which is what the law looks for, to know every last detail of what is going on everywhere. Are you aware of the exact finances between what the school and what the church pays for? Does maybe the school pay for certain upkeep on the church or vice versa? There's oftentimes some cross-contamination between these two buckets of the church and the school. And in many places, it may just be one bucket entirely from a financial position. And the same could also be true from a legal perspective. Are these different parcels of land? Are these organized as two different legal entities, as I mentioned, or is it all one entity, one financial bucket? I don't know how your particular situation runs, but my point is the fact that odds are your average reasonable person coming in, it may not be reasonable for them to have a thorough understanding of all those things as well. But again, the prosecutor could be trying to get into that. This is the reason why I think the signage is going to be so important, to try to set to the reasonable person, here is what the default status is. This is church, this is house of worship grounds. This is school grounds, and you can try to bound that by time if you want. Don't forget the parking lot trap. Be sure to include that in there. Strategy number 3, written permission and program exemptions. So in Wisconsin, we have a law at 948.605 that says that if a person is complying with the federal law at 18 USC 922 sub Q sub 2 sub B, you gotta love the citations, right? Then you can basically possess in both a school zone and on school grounds. So let's flip open that helpful federal statute book that I know you have right next to you. Let's go to sub 4, that's Roman numeral sub 4, and it reads, by an individual for use in a program approved by a school in the school zone. So in other words, the Wisconsin law, and your state may be the same, because Wisconsin tends to be very middle of the road, but please check your local listings what your law is in your state. Wisconsin basically says, look, you can carry a firearm in a school zone and on school grounds by an individual, if you're an individual for use in a program approved by a school and in the school zone. So some states allow for something that basically amounts to something like a hall pass, and this gets very state-specific exceptions. So again, you'll need to check your local listings, talk to a qualified local attorney, but basically you could try to set up certain events or programs that would allow certain individuals to be able to carry firearms in order for effectively church purposes. Because after all, church is a program, right? Choir practice is a program, right? Scripture study is a program, and so on and so forth. Now, pro tip, to make sure that you are going to be getting this option if you have it available to you, I would suggest, again, carefully following the wording of the statute and putting things in writing. Now, you could really try to push the definition of program and try to expand this to signs. In other words, you can post this up that say that, look, church is a specific program that is authorized under state and federal law, if you're in Wisconsin, subject to this particular statute, and the school board, or whatever your particular school agency is, if you're parochial, whatnot, gives individuals who are lawfully allowed to be able to possess concealed firearms to possess concealed firearms for the purposes of church programming. That's one example of how you can word it. Again, is that a 0% chance of prosecution or conviction? No, but that gives you a significant amount of armor depending upon the wording of your particular laws, the written wording of your particular programming, the signage, how it is that you choose to do it. Likewise, if you stay in the federal statutes, you look one more below it to Roman numeral sub 5 in the federal statutes, it goes on to read, by an individual in accordance with a contract entered into between a school in the school zone and the individual or an employer of the individual. Okay, that's a lot of words. It's a lot of words that say individual. Basically, we get down to the fact that even if there's no particular programming, that in essence, the school can contract with an individual to be able to possess firearms on the grounds of the school. Now, ordinarily, we might be thinking about this for the purposes of some sort of private security or something like this, but you can see how you can start to expand these definitions. Now, I want to be very careful to key you into the word contract. Contract was used in the federal statute. Now, keep in mind, a contract, the 3 basics. In order to have a contract, you need offer, acceptance, and something called consideration. Now, I don't have time to teach everybody first year law student stuff. The gist to it is this consideration thing, this is more than just a document that you draw up between a few people and say, hey, you're allowed to carry here and sign school board dated such and such. That may not be a contract. In fact, there's a good chance it's not a contract because it lacks something called consideration. The safest thing that I can tell you to do is talk to a qualified attorney in your state to help explain what this consideration means, to see if this whole exception possibly applies to you. Maybe there's a better way of doing this. As a note, my firm has assisted people in Wisconsin with these sorts of questions and issues. So if you're in Wisconsin, if you're interested, be sure to check out Grieve Law in the description box below. Last but not least, number 4, keep in mind that your state may have other non-firearms related statutes on the books. So right now we're only talking about firearm related issues and exceptions, but be careful because for instance in Wisconsin, it is illegal under 948.61 to possess dangerous weapons other than firearms on school premises. So if you decide to go with the signage route, but if you only key it to firearms, it may be lawful, arguably, in order for someone to then to possess firearms, but not that clip-on pocket knife or something like that. So you're going to want to keep this probably open to include weapons and things like that. Again, my whole point that I want people to take away from this now is the fact that this is complicated. And it's going to be varying a lot depending upon the very specifics of your state. And those specifics could be changing according to both local, state, as well as national law. One judge somewhere 3 states away makes a ruling, and that sign may no longer be valid. At least it may no longer be valid the way that it is written. So if you're going to be doing this, you need to make sure that you are staying and trying to keep up to date on everything. This is a no felony zone that I'm trying to keep everybody in. I want people to be able to lawfully carry firearms to protect themselves, their loved ones, and of course their flock. Churches and other houses of worship have been targeted by sick and deranged individuals for any number of purposes over the years, ranging from hate to just it seems like a convenient group to hit, you name it. This is a soft target and a target that has been picked on in the past, and I predict it will be again in the future. So if you want to harden that target to try to react, if God forbid the evil does come to your doorstep, I hope these legal strategies will start the discussion for you to have with your attorneys in your particular state. Stick around for our ever popular quote of the day. If you just found us while browsing through, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to make sure you don't miss any of our other future content that's out there. The best way you can support this channel, it's really easy. Click like and join the discussion in the comment field below that tells the algorithm this was a good video, this is a good channel, and that you liked it. Now to our always popular quote of the day. This one comes from Epictetus, ancient philosopher. Quote, "If you were ever tempted to look for outside approval, realize that you have compromised your integrity. If you need a witness, be your own." Hopefully you can be a witness to much more than yourself, though. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this one, please feel free to check out some of our other great content, and we'll see you in the next one.